The State of College Sports with NCAA ambassador and broadcast journalist Jack Ford. Today on Carpe Diem. Nothing says fall more than college football. On campuses and in living rooms across the country, fans from LA to Miami gather around tailgates and flat screens for some of the finest athleticism outside the NFL. Yet college sports and the NCAA are far more than a few schools down south playing for a football title. It's a massive configuration of sports and teams that not only demand a considerable amount of time, money, and infrastructure, but also hold a special and at times controversial space in our social conscience. So what is the state of college sports today, and what does the future of this over 100-year-old institution hold? To talk about that and probably a few other things, we welcome Jack Ford, legendary broadcast journalist, legal analyst, NCAA ambassador, and not to be forgotten, former Yale defensive back. Jack, welcome to Montclair State and welcome to Carpe Diem.
Thanks, Keith. Always good to see you, and I can't tell you how impressed I am by what you've got here at Montclair State, the facilities and the folks that are working in this program. This is magnificent.
It is wonderful. So you were a college athlete and a very good one back when Yale was a prominent football team. They're 3-1 in the Ivies now, so they're good again.
Getting back there.
They're getting back there. But you've had a renewed interest in college athletics. Besides the fact that you were an athlete, what's kept you involved in college sports, particularly at this point in your life?
You know, I've said this very often. I am an evangelist for two things: for the transformative value of college education and for the opportunities that college sports provide. And I'm raised by a single mother. My father disappears on us when I'm about 5 years old. My mom goes back to college to get her teaching degree when she's 39 years old so she can take care of her 4 children. I'm not going to college unless somebody else is going to pay for it. And I'm confident enough to say that I'm maybe not getting into Yale unless they're recruiting me to play football. So for me, I look at the transformative value. Going to Yale, I'm from Point Pleasant Beach High School. 96 kids in my graduating class, and I show up at Yale University. And as I said, I was fortunate enough to get inducted into Yale's version of a Hall of Fame a few years ago. And what I said at the ceremony is, you know what, I showed up here on campus as a freshman with literally everything I owned in a single duffel bag. And I left 4 years later with everything I would need for the rest of my life. That to me is the value of a college education. And that's the opportunities that playing football gave to me. So it was the springboard. I'm comfortable saying this. It was a springboard for everything I've ever been able to do with my life. Both of my children were Division I athletes. Daughter and son both played lacrosse at Yale, and I saw how it helped them in their development. So I am an apostle for these opportunities and the values of sport and college athletics.
I want to talk a little bit about your kids' experiences in sports and how that's different than yours a little bit later. But what was it like being a college athlete when you played? How did being an athlete, a Yale football player, affect your experiences on campus?
It was at the time, this was back in the early 70s, and as you mentioned, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Harvard were still major football powers. My junior year, we played Dartmouth for the Lambert Trophy. We were both ranked ahead, we were both undefeated. We were both ranked ahead of Penn State and Pitt and Boston College, the other powers in the East, on the East Coast. So you were playing big-time football, and we were getting 60,000 people in the Yale Bowl for games. I think the smallest crowd I played in front of might have been 30,000 people. So it was big-time football. We were at televised games. But Yale had that great balance, that being a football player and playing these games on Saturdays were marvelous for you, but you also got to be a student. One of the concerns that I've seen, it's something that the NCAA has been trying to deal with, is this notion of time balance for students. I think when I was playing, it wasn't that big a problem. Even I had good friends of mine. One of my best friends growing up went down and played football at the University of South Carolina, was a first-team All-American down there. And we would talk about our various schedules, and even then, they were in the ACC at the time, South Carolina was. Even then, he had the opportunity, ran track in the spring.
So you don't see coaches letting that happen anymore.
No, not at that level.
No.
So I think the difference is back then there wasn't as much of a demand on our time. I mean, you still want to be the best you could be. You want to work out, you want to get bigger, faster, stronger, but it wasn't a demand. It wasn't a structural demand for you. And I think that's one of the issues now that the NCAA and the various colleges are wrestling with. How do we provide the best athletic opportunity? And interesting, there have been polls done of the athletes themselves, student athletes themselves, and they're saying, we want to do this. We want to be practicing and working in the off season to get better. But I think that's the biggest difference between when I was playing and now.
Do you ever have to almost save the athletes from themselves? Because I was a college athlete, not in a revenue-generating sport, so one of the sports that people didn't really worry about. Yeah. But we always wanted to run more.
But you were a runner. You guys are crazy.
We are.
You guys are always
literally
running.
crazy.
Yes,
yeah.
you are.
But we always wanted to run more, and our coach would tell us, my number one job should be to hold you back. Is it sometimes the NCAA's job to make sure that athletes aren't forgetting about why they're supposed to be in college in the first place?
It is. I think it's the universities, the institutions, the colleges and institutions. It's their obligation. And people have to remember, the NCAA is an umbrella organization. 1,100 members. The NCAA doesn't create rules. The members create the rules. The NCAA says, okay, we're now in charge of enforcing them and facilitating them. So this really has to come from the institutions themselves. And you are seeing that. And you get a bit of a conflict. You're right. Because it's almost sort of as the parent, the institutions are saying, well, we want to pull back a little bit. We want to give you a chance to have more free time, to engage in more activities, to join some sort of club or take classes at a time that ordinarily you wouldn't get a chance to because of your practice schedule. And yet the irony is, as you mentioned, it's sort of a dichotomy here. The polls that have been done, for whatever they're worth, of the student athletes are saying we're okay with this, and as a matter of fact, we'll take more time if we can, because again, they're the college athletes, they're driven to be better. That's why they're at the level that they're at. So few people don't realize the percentage of high school athletes who go on to become college athletes is minimal.
Right, particularly at the Division I level.
Particularly Division I. But so you're talking about people who by nature and definition are driven to be good at everything, especially their athletics. So there is a conflict there of them wanting to invest more time and the institution saying, that's great, we want you to do that, but we want you to get the full college experience too. Have the opportunity, if nothing else, to take a nap in the afternoon, to sleep in a little bit. And that's something that the colleges and universities are working with now.
Yeah, I used to plan my schedule and my class schedule, my practice schedule, so I'd have from 1 to 3, so I'd be awake for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that in my role, but that was the only way I could make it through the day.
Well, I remember when we were in season, you'd come back from the practice fields and the field house, and you get back to campus, and you'd go have your training table meal, and then you're going to have to get to the library for some things. And I built in a half-hour nap that more often than not I took in the library.
Yes.
I had a great spot in one of the great libraries in Yale, and had big comfy armchairs and couches, and I'd get there and I'd say, okay, I'm here. Here's my half hour. Bang. And then I wake up and I said, all right, let's go to work.
Yeah.
We're good.
One of the jokes we'd always play on the new incoming students on the track team was when they fell asleep, we'd hide their book somewhere in the stacks.
That's great. And now they're
let
like,
them go through
what
that.
do I got to do?
Like, I can't nap anymore.
A real quick story, if I can tell you about how we are sort of conditioned to certain things. So I've been teaching at Yale now for the last 12 years. I teach an undergraduate seminar about famous trials. And usually I'll get up, it's one day a week for about 2.5 hours, and I'll get up a little bit early, have lunch, and I will go oftentimes to the same spot in the same portion of the library to do some work or reading. And I still find myself, when I walk in there, my first instinct, okay, nap time.
Yeah, can I get those two chairs together? And get
I'm in my 60s now, and I'm teaching. I'm here. Okay, I'm good, nap.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a half hour.
Yeah. Now, your kids both were college athletes as well. How were their experiences different than your experiences?
Primarily the amount of time that they spent with their sports. Again, both lacrosse athletes. Daughter first, and they're both hard workers, always were. My daughter's a cancer surgeon now. Our son is a banker, private banker in New York, and they understood working hard. But they would literally, Keith, as lacrosse players, I'd bring them up to school, maybe August 26th or August 27th, get them moved into their rooms. The next day, they'd start working out for lacrosse, which is a spring sport. And they'd have, what you call captain's practices. The NCAA gave them a certain amount of time for practices in the fall and a certain amount of scrimmages that they could play in the fall. But the difference was, and again, when I look at us and being fairly major football powers then, and I've said to them, I was involved maybe half as much time as you are now here. And that's what the system has become. So I think the difference is, plus they're so more sophisticated in their training, in their weight training. We had a little, and Yale has great facilities, but back then there was a little kind of weight room that had a couple of universal machines and, and some free weights out there now. You look at the facilities, I look at Yale and our athletic director, Tom Beckett, is retiring at the end of this year after 24 years, and he's done a marvelous job. The facilities there are as good as, I travel around the country, as SEC schools, as Big Ten schools, ACC schools. So now, not only do you have more time demands and the inclination to do it, but the facilities are so much better.
The facilities, I know it here at Montclair State, the facilities that are available to the general student body are 50 times better than what we had as college athletes.
Much better.
We never had it. We would go to this, and we were afraid the weights were going to fall on us.
Right.
I mean, they would just break while we're using them.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, as runners, we tried to avoid the weight room at all costs, so we'd sit there and just
No,
kinda
but you're
hang out.
absolutely right. When you look at, and I've seen the facilities here at Montclair State and at other places, for the students who are not athletes, as you said, 100% better than what we had in our facilities as fairly big-time athletes.
Yeah. Now, it's really, I don't have the exact number, but I feel like it's like 3 to 4% of the athletes that are actually in the revenue-generating game, right? Yeah. It's a very small number. That tends to get the disproportionate amount of attention. So we're talking about football players in Division I at the Power 5 conferences, maybe Power 6, depending on how you look at it. Basketball, men's basketball in some regards. It's a very small number. Should they be playing by the same rules as all the rest of the student athletes? There are these rules that regulate what student athletes can and can't do, but it's almost like we have two very different systems. Should they all be regulated the same way under the same umbrella organization?
I think they should. The only difference between them, all right, you take a cross-country runner, all right, and a football player, right? You're putting in more time than I am, right? But we are both deeply invested in our sports. Now, football is going to generate some revenues. Cross country, and it's a marvelous sport, it's not going to generate revenues. So one of the explanations that you say to people is, well, the money coming in from the high-profile sports is going to fund the other sports, and that's something that people really don't get. They're thinking, well, football is making all this money, basketball making all this money, why shouldn't it be going to the players? Well, the answer is because it's going to the cross-country runners and to the volleyball players and to all of the other sports that universities are going to sponsor. I mean, Yale, I think, has 30-some varsity sports. You travel around the country, even the SEC schools that are focusing, or the ACC schools. I was down at Florida State last week giving a talk about, these college issues, and Florida State has 18 different varsity sports, and they're counting on football to do it. So that's an important part of it. But just because you were in a revenue-generating sport, if you believe in the amateur model, and I do deeply, and I've lived it. For me, it gave me all the opportunities to do things that I've been able to do in my life. And I point to all of that to football and being able to go to Yale and do that. If you believe in the amateur model, it shouldn't make any difference that your sport generates more money. My sport generates more money than your sport does. And we shouldn't be treated differently. In some ways, we are. I mean, if you look at the football players, I'll talk about Florida State again, having just been there. Their facilities are marvelous. The dining facilities, although now they're available, it's not just football, it's for all sports. But the dining facilities are so much better than what you and I were used to. So you are being treated a little bit better, but I just don't think there should be any significant differentiation between the revenue sport athletes, student athletes, and the others, if you believe in the amateur model. And it's the foundation of college sports.
I mean, you and I differ a little bit on this. We've had lots of conversations. I tend to believe that if a college athlete or if a program's generating tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe the University of Texas, maybe not at this particular moment, but in Alabama, make the argument that one of those athletes that is playing a very professional-looking like program, as you turn it on Saturday afternoon, that's putting in, as you know, legally 20 hours, but effectively probably 40 hours a week, and is playing to hopefully then kind of achieve the next level of professionalism, make the argument that they shouldn't get paid. Because I'm trying to make the argument they should.
Yeah. I think a couple of things.
Wait, let me add one thing. Where the coach is making $5 million.
Well, that's the optic that skews everything.
Yeah.
That is the one that where you look at where it's hard to get around.
People are making money off these athletes, right?
And oftentimes I've heard people say to me when I'm traveling around the country having these conversations, why can't the NCAA do something about these salaries? And the reality is, should a football coach be making $5 million, maybe 5 times more than the chancellor of a university or a Nobel laureate on the thing? And the answer to that is, well, it doesn't seem like they should. But people have said to me, well, are they worth that? And the answer is, you're worth whatever the market will pay you. I mean, that's a basic fundamental concept of capitalism. So if somebody's going to pay a football coach $5 million, the short answer is when people say, why doesn't the NCAA do something about it? They can't legally. They tried. Back in 1984, the NCAA was trying to control, who football games and who would put it on. The NCAA also tried to create a salary structure for coaches, and the court system, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, said you can't do that. That's an antitrust violation. So the NCAA can't say to its member institutions, you can't pay a football coach more than $1 million a year. It's illegal. It's up to the institutions themselves. They have to make that determination. And the institutions themselves can't say, all the SEC presidents get together and say, here's the deal, guys, men and women. Here's the deal. We're not going to pay, we're going to agree. We're not going to pay our head coaches anything more than something. That's an antitrust violation. So legally it can't be done. So but the optics, you're right. It just skews any conversation you have about it. But you go back to the notion of paying. And the biggest problem I have with all of that is it tends to diminish the value of a college education and a college scholarship. I mean, if you look at it, if you take a school like Alabama, the value of their scholarship, let's say they stay in 5 years, right? Do a redshirt year, you're going to stay for 5 years. The value of that scholarship is more than $200,000. And a lot of these athletes are like me. I couldn't have afforded, when I was growing up with a single mother raising me, that anybody was going to pay $200,000 for me to go to Yale. But fortunately, Yale paid for it for me. Alabama pays for it for these guys. It is, every study that you look at says that a college education is the great transformative element of your life. That you will make, I think the most recent survey, a college graduate makes on average more than $1 million more than somebody who doesn't have a degree in the course of their lifetime. There are now studies that show that you live a happier and better life, not just because of the money part, but because of what you've developed there. So I have a real hard time when people say, well, they're not getting paid. Yeah, they are. You're getting a college education paid for free, to play a game that you love to play, and we'd all still be playing if we could. And you'd play for free if you could.
Now, I want to jump on that college scholarship issue a little bit, because for you and for a lot of the athletes that have gotten them, it is a transformative life experience, and it's a way for them to get a college education that they would not have been able to afford otherwise. There could be another way to look at that, and maybe a downside of that is the pursuit of that college scholarship in many communities has become known as almost the only way to get out, right? To get out of this community, to get out of this ghetto, to get out of this small town, the only way out is through sports. And it seems to some ways both kind of put youth sports into overdrive in the more affluent communities, certainly, in certain sports. But in other communities, it takes away the idea that there are a lot of ways to earn academic need-based scholarships. Does this pursuit of the athletic scholarship kind of diminish the potential for all the other dollars, which are far greater than the athletic dollars? Athletic dollars are this, need-based academic are this. Is there that argument to be made?
I think there is. And a lot of this depends upon what kind of guidance you're getting as a young person. Because the reality is, as you know, it's much less than 2% of the 475,000 college athletes, Division I, II, and III, each year. Much less than 2% of them are ever going to draw a paycheck for the sport that they play. So again, this comes back to the value of a college education and the springboard it provides for you here. So if you start off understanding that, and I think, Keith, we've gotten so much better now when you look at the attitude and the approach that the big time sports universities and colleges are bringing to the table in terms of their assets. There was a time years ago when basically it was like, yeah, come play for us. You graduate. Yeah, okay, if you graduate, that's great, but you know what, as a coach, I don't really care. All I just care about, we're going to win games, all right? It wasn't that long ago. I travel around the country, and I see now what these coaches are doing. I did a story for 60 Minute Sports on Dabo Swinney and the Clemson football program last year.
Very successful.
It's a good
coach,
illustration. Yeah, right. They're graduating 80-some% of their football players. Right. That's higher than the graduation rate of the average male student at Clemson University. They had on the field last year when they played Alabama for the national championship. And by the way, Alabama's graduating almost 80% of their players. On the field last year for Clemson, there were 23 graduate students playing for Clemson. 3 of them already had 1 master's degree and were working on a 2nd master's degree. So they are doing now, and we've gotten so much better, and the numbers have in 20 years have jumped dramatically. Across the board, Division I student athletes graduating 86% rate. Across the board, in those same institutions, non-athletes, 66%. So you're graduating at 20% higher rate. So the point is now that going to these places and being a college athlete, you now have a much better chance, numbers-wise, of actually graduating with a degree and a meaningful degree that's going to allow you to go out in the workplace and make a lot of money. So there are some, and we've seen it, as a parent, I've been on sidelines of games when my kids were playing, and I'm seeing these other parents going crazy, screaming at their kids, and I'm realizing you got to get some perspective in what you do. This is a game, a grammar school game or a high school game. Get some perspective. And you know what? The odds are your child is not going to go out and be a pro and make a whole lot of money so you can retire on the money that they make. But if you're using that as your springboard, and you see people now, and if you get some good guidance in high schools and saying to young people, men and women, look, if you get good at this sport, but you're going to have to be good academically too, because now the standards for you to go in are significantly higher, this can be a great opportunity for you. Maybe you can become a pro. But even if you don't, your life is going to be so much better because of this.
And you've been on the NCAA infractions committee, so you've seen kind of the dirty underbelly of a lot of the programs. We had a fairly recent scandal that involved shoe companies filtering money through universities with the aspiration of getting those future athletes onto their dole at some point. There are a lot of outsiders that get involved with the game, and that becomes one of the most challenging parts of college sports. Is it's not just the players, the athletes, the coaches, and the universities. It's all of these other folks on the outside that want to make money off this operation. How do you keep, and I don't want to pick on the shoe companies, but how do you keep the shoe companies and the boosters and all of those other folks that have a stake in the game out of the business?
It is so hard. I think it's gotten so much better in one way that it used to be. But what has changed dramatically now, let's talk about basketball, all right? Because that's a good illustration, the scandal that you mentioned here. When we were growing up, basketball, if you're a high school basketball player and you think you're good enough to play in college, it's your high school program that's going to catapult you to that. So coaches would come to high school games. They'd talk to high school coaches about things. There might be some summer camps, some of the legendary summer basketball camps that were run by legendary coaches, and you'd go there. But the person who was in charge of you was your high school basketball coach. They knew what you were doing academically and athletically. They would help line up your interviews. What has changed now, and the basketball folks will point to this, is the AAU world. Right? And I don't mean to indict everybody involved, because there are a lot of people who are well-intentioned and are genuinely trying to help these young people in their lives move forward. And then there are a lot who aren't. The hangers-on, the ones that are seeing that somehow dollar signs, that if I get behind this young person here, they're going to be the real deal down the road, and all of a sudden now I'm making a lot of money off of them. They're the ones who you need to police. But the question is, how do you do that? You can't legislate relationships. You can't say to a young high school basketball player, you're not allowed to meet and talk with this person. Now, there's some things you can do, and they've legislated the notion of boosters. I mean, boosters, it used to be that I could talk to, when I finished playing at Yale, and I'm in law school, and now I'm a lawyer, and even when I got into journalism a couple of decades ago, if there was some local really good football player, I could walk up to him after a game and say, hey, I'm Jack Ford, played at Yale. You look like just the kind of person we want to get to come up at Yale. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah. And maybe I'll give you a little summer job on the side.
Right, exactly.
You don't have to show up. We're almost out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. College football playoff rankings have just come out. Yeah. Give me your Final Four and give me your winner.
I like Georgia. I like Clemson getting back into it. I think Clemson has got sort of that momentum to get it up. I think the question is going to be, can you get Georgia and Alabama both in there? I happen to be one of these people who believes that you should win your conference championship if you're going to play for the national championship. So how that is all going to shake out. One of them will be there. I think Clemson. I wouldn't be surprised to see if you get a Big Ten school in there. I think this has been one of the more adventuresome years for that in picking who's going to get there.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think Alabama wins. It is, you'd never tell Alabama that they're not going to win the title.
I think you know what? I think you may well be right.
Yeah. Jack, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure,
it's been a
Keith,
real pleasure.
Anytime.
Yeah. If you would like more information about this or any other Carpe Diem, you can write us at the email address on your screen, carpediem@mail.montclair.edu, or call us at 973-655-5158. For Carpe Diem, I'm Keith Strudler. Thanks for watching.